Good afternoon and welcome to today's program titled Under Pressure, Current Challenges of College Women That Impact Behavioral Health. I'm Tom Valentino, Senior Editor for the Institute for the Advancement of Behavioral Healthcare. Today's program is sponsored by Foundations Recovery Network. Thank you to our sponsor and to our audience for giving us your time and attention today. Before we get started, we have a few details we'd like to go over. To submit a question for our presenter, please use the Q&A area below the slides at any time. You do not have to wait until the end of the program to ask your question. If you're having technical issues, please click the Test Your Connection button below the video window to chat with support. And finally, to download a copy of the presentation, please click the link in the Resources tab to the right of your slides. Special note about CE credit: to get your CE, you must watch the program all the way through the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. At the end, do not leave the web page. The site will automatically redirect you to a survey. The survey must be completed in order to generate your CE certificate. For those watching in a group, please download the group submission guide in the Resources tab and follow the instructions provided. Please note CE credit is not available for the archived webinar. It is only available for the live event on August 28, 2018. Finally, for those of you who tweet, please tweet along with us using the hashtag IABHCLiveWebinar. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Courtney Grimes. She is a trained and currently serves as the Clinical Director for the Eating Disorders Coalition of Tennessee, a nonprofit providing help, hope, and support for all of those suffering from disordered eating. She specializes in eating disorder treatment, body image and self-esteem issues, depression, anxiety, and couples/family work. Thank you, Courtney, for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, the audience is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that the information presented here is helpful to you in various capacities for college women that you may or may not encounter in real life, in your practice, in your agencies, in your world. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started because I know that we don't have a whole lot of time, and challenges that face college women, that's a huge, huge topic. So as I was putting this together, I was trying to figure out how to organize this kind of information, how to sort of narrow it down into usable documentation, usable slides. So what I have been able to put together is generally a presentation that focuses on the college environment and the challenges that are presented to these women in this environment. We will go over briefly various treatment interventions, various treatment models to work with these young women and the challenges that they're facing on these campuses all over our country. But most importantly, I want you guys to be able to recognize these women when you see them. A lot of times these women are not going to present with the actual issue. So a lot of times these women are going to present with things like anxiety, depression. They're going to present with things such as apathy, social issues, but oftentimes there will be something underlying, something going on underneath what they present with. So I wanted to definitely touch base on that. I'm having a little problem with the slides. I need slide 4 if that is helpful to our tech person. The first slide that I want to go over is academic pressure. So these women, a lot of them are under tremendous academic pressure. They are coming from smaller pools where they were big fish. A lot of these girls are coming from high schools where they were valedictorians, or high schools where they were president of the class. They were star athletes. They were prom queen. They were homecoming queen. A lot of things that made them special, made them stand out, and provided them with a lot of identity. So when they get to these colleges, they're looking around and everyone else in their class is just like them. Everybody's cream of the crop. Everybody's been valedictorian. Everybody was a star athlete. So identity is getting lost. A sense of specialness is being dissipated. So a lot of these girls are kind of wandering around. They don't really understand what's going on, and they don't know why they feel the way they do. So they start to feel very anxious. They start to feel very depressed, and they start to be very malleable developmentally as well. So the first thing I wanted to go over is the academic pressure. There's a ton of perfectionism with these girls, a lot of competitiveness. To be the best takes a very strong sense of competition, a very strong sense of needing to win. And a lot of times that competitiveness can be taken too far, especially academically. So I hear this all the time with my college women. You know, I was talking to my roommate and she made such and such on her organic chemistry test, and I only made this. It makes me feel horrible, Courtney. It makes me feel so bad about myself. You'll hear that quite a bit. They talk about using grades to measure a sense of self-worth, grades to measure a sense of winning, and ultimately a sense of safety. The next area of pressure that I really, really see with these women is family pressure. So we're dealing with these girls who are coming from various socioeconomic backgrounds, but they will end up at these universities for various reasons. One, family money, or possibly a full ride like a scholarship. A lot of times the families for these girls are putting a lot of pressure on them to represent the family, family reputation, family representation. I'm going to my parents' alma mater. I owe my parents to continue their legacy, to do my best. I don't want to make my family look bad. I hear that quite a bit. Folks from lower socioeconomic brackets feel tremendous pressure to succeed if they are on a full ride, if they're on a full scholarship. So if their grade point average drops at all, then they can't stay there. Then they've ruined everything. What if they're the first person in their class to go to college? What if they are the first person in their family to be able to succeed and have a career? A lot of times you'll see that with these girls coming in. Something else that I hear a lot about, believe it or not, is dating, being married. A lot of these girls still, especially in the South where I am, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was raised in the South, and we are still under a lot of pressure down here to make sure you have a boyfriend, make sure you're dating the right kind of guy, make sure he's from the right family, make sure that you're always with somebody. And if you're not with somebody, if you're not dating somebody, that can get very tricky in terms of dealing with pressure from family. Another form of pressure that we will see a lot with these women is social pressure. Being the best, being the prettiest, being the skinniest, being in the best sorority or the best extracurricular activities, social pressure in terms of making sure that you're at all the right parties and you go out all the time, even when you don't want to. A lot of times you'll see drinking, alcohol abuse, drug abuse kind of sneak in through social pressure. It's because, everybody else is doing it. I don't want to be the one person out who's not doing it. So they're under a ton of pressure socially as well. And now you'll see this a lot with college women in terms of physical appearance. Instagram, Facebook, anything where people can present their best via social media, we take as someone else's someone else's best we compare to our worst. And 90% of the time, people who are presenting their quote-unquote best via social media, it's fantasy. It's all made up. It is not an accurate representation of someone's life. So you've got all these college women looking around, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through Facebook, looking at everyone else's edited photos, everyone else's pictures of their food, pictures of parties, pictures of how much weight they've lost. And internally, we are seeing these women comparing their internal dialogue, the internal monologue, that internal narrative. You're the worst, you need to do better, you need to perform better. That inner narrative is being held up against photos of everyone else's sort of fake best. So the gap there is becoming even bigger. That gap is getting filled with depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, all sorts of things that these girls will present with. The last sort of bracket that I have seen a lot of in terms of pressures facing these women is sexual pressure. A lot of girls go to college with not a whole lot of sexual experience in high school. A lot of girls do go to college with more than enough sexual experience in high school. So you've got all of these people kind of coming together under this pressure cooker that we call a college campus. And so the conversations they're having in dorm rooms, the conversations they're having in cafeterias, the conversations they're having at chapter meetings at sororities. Oh my gosh, this is what happened. Oh my gosh, this is what I did with it. Do you know how this happens? And what do you guys do? So you hear a lot of this comparing, and I hear this all the time with my girls, and I'm sure that you guys hear this too if you work with this population. They feel inadequate, or they feel scared, or they feel that they're not going to be desirable, or they're not going to be wanted or loved by men because of their lack of experience or having experience. Another thing that I see a lot of and that I hear a lot of, and I'm sure that you guys do too, is sexual assault on college campuses. There's so much pressure for these kids, for the women especially, and if some of these girls, if they're not ready to be sexually active, they feel pressure to do so, and they don't want to say no, or they try to say no, or they don't know how to say no. So a lot of them are being taken advantage of quite a bit. And you'll see a lot of this kind of present sometimes as self-harm, self-injury. Sometimes these girls are taking out this anxiety and this frustration on their physical body because they don't feel that they're good enough. They don't feel like they are worthy. They don't feel like they can perform to other people's standards. It's very, very difficult to break through that barrier a lot of the times to get to these women and address underlying issues. So something I wanted to definitely address with this presentation is how to get to underlying issues, regardless of what is being presented. There is typically something else going on underneath. Perfectionism. Let's talk about that for a minute. So a lot of these girls struggle in a cycle of perfectionism, which a lot of times can lead to procrastination. A lot of times that will lead to paralysis. So their perfectionism literally becomes crippling to them, literally becomes cement shoes. It's hard for them to think. It's hard for them to achieve. It's hard for them to meet the expectations that they're used to meeting because, again, they are not top of the heap anymore. Now they are more of a smaller fish in a bigger pond, and all the other fish can perform just as well as they do, if not better, oftentimes. So this is very confusing. It's scary. It drives up the sense of competition. The perfectionism can be crippling. And I think that there's a difference between maladaptive perfectionism and adaptive perfectionism. So a lot of times you'll see these girls who have very adaptive sense of perfectionism. They're always interested in being the best version of themselves. They're always interested in performing to the best of their ability. They're always interested in trying to evolve, I guess would be a good word. Now, maladaptive perfectionism is more of what we're talking about with this particular population. Now, these girls, maladaptive perfectionism, you'll see this. They're very preoccupied. There's a discrepancy between their really high and sometimes rigid standards and their performance. So maladaptive perfectionists are way too hard on themselves. They're tormented, I guess would be a good word, maybe by a single missed point on an exam, or they can become just completely distraught over not getting the highest grade in a class, to the point where their lives are interrupted. The thoughts become so pervasive and so self-destructive that it's hard for them to function. They suffer from self-doubt and a lot of internal discouragement, and a lot of them will experience really poor socio-emotional adjustment, and their grades will slip. Academic achievement can slide. Maladaptive perfectionism, you'll see, goes hand in hand with procrastination. So sometimes these girls come in and they're talking about, I just don't care. I just put this off. Like, I have this huge paper. I have this 38-page paper I've got to write, and I don't want to do it. Courtney, I don't want to. I just can't. I can't make myself even do the. I don't know. I don't know. And so they need help. Maybe they'll talk about they want to jump start on something, or I need to learn how to get a jump start. I need to get back on my A game. You'll hear that a lot. Or I need to get ahead of this. I need to get my act together. Things like that. A lot of times the way that they vocalize this to us is very self-deprecatory. I can't do this. I'm having a really hard time performing. I don't know what's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? I feel something's wrong with me. Signs of maladaptive perfectionism, like what we're talking about, please don't take this lightly. Please don't brush this off, because again, as they present with this type of information, there's something much, much bigger going on underneath. There's something much bigger that we need to address. A lot of times there is some pretty serious mental illness happening. There's some pretty serious mental illness that is developing. Now, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, we all know NAMI, 1 in 4 students has a diagnosable illness. And 40% of these kids are not getting any help. They don't understand that something's wrong. They don't know that this can be fixed, that we can help them. 80% of these kids feel so overwhelmed by their responsibilities. They become so anxious that they struggle in school and in life. A lot of these kids suffer in silence. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to appear weak. They don't want to appear less than. They don't want to fall from the top. They're trying so hard to stay the best at everything and regain that sense of safety and identity that they had maybe in high school. So they can't say anything. They won't say anything. They're not going to speak up about this to people in their lives, because they just want to lock down harder. They just want to perform more. In 2014, a national survey of college counseling centers reported that 52% of their clients, 52%, had severe psychological problems. That's over half of these kids, severe psychological problems. A majority of the respondents in these surveys noted increases over the past 5 years of anxiety disorders, crises requiring immediate response, psychiatric meds, clinical depression, and this is just what's being reported to the on-campus counseling centers, which are grossly understaffed. Usually, you'll see just a handful of counselors for hundreds and hundreds of kids. So these counselors are dealing with half of their student body every year, suffering from pretty severe mental illnesses, and not having the bandwidth or the capacity to treat all of these kids. And so then we're looking at outsourcing, then we're looking to referring these kids to outpatient centers around campus. Well, what if there's not anything within a 20, 30-mile radius? Then what? In a 2016 survey of students by the American College Health Association, over half of these kids, 53% of the students, reported that they felt hopeless, and 40% reported feeling so depressed that they couldn't even function. Now, again, the type of client, how do you know if you're looking at one of our girls? One of our girls, she's going to walk in, you're going to love her. She's going to be awesome. She's going to be very agenda-driven. She's always going to do her homework assignments that you give her. She's going to be very high-functioning. Typically, she'll be really beautiful and thin and fit and athletic and put together. She's going to be verbal. She will be very easily able to describe how she feels, very emotionally articulate, I guess would be a good word. She's going to be very interested in pleasing you as the clinician. She will be very interested in making sure you're not mad with her. You'll notice a little transference probably with maybe she's transferring emotions that she feels towards teachers or friends or boyfriends or her mother or an aunt or even her father or a boyfriend. She's going to be very interested, again, in pleasing you as an authority figure. It's going to be important to her that you like her. They present with depression, anxiety. Sometimes it's just poor self-esteem, or they feel like they're procrastinating, or they can't just get their act together. I used to get up at 4:30 and work out every morning. Courtney, I don't know why I can't do that anymore. What's wrong with me? A lot of times, and I'll get into this in a little bit, they're going to present with some eating disorder symptoms. They're going to be extremely rigid with their food, very rigid with their exercise. They're probably going to have some unaddressed anger because, again, these are good girls. And good girls don't get angry. Good girls can't get angry because they have to keep it all together all the time. And sadly, a lot of these girls are going to be presenting with a lot of suicide ideation. They're going to have dreams. Well, I have dreams about suicide, or sometimes I just feel like it would be amazing to just run my car off a bridge. God, wouldn't that be great if I could just go to sleep and not wake up? A lot of times they're going to present with sort of OCD symptoms, things like that. These are all what I call Whacka Mole symptoms with this population a lot of the times. So you have maybe, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the game Whack-A Mole. We have sort of the board, and then on the top of the board you've got these moles, these Whack-A-Moles that sort of mechanically pop up one after the other, right? Now, with this population, you'll see a lot of the time things like drug abuse on these college campuses. Adderall abuse is the new thing. That's the hot new thing to abuse. Substance abuse like alcohol abuse. You'll see things like very rigid eating, rigid exercise, sometimes binge purge cycles, acting out sexually, maybe running up a ton of debt online, like online shopping, things like that. All of these oftentimes can present as whack-a-mole. So these are all sort of various symptoms of an underlying problem. Now, what I have seen oftentimes with very traditional therapeutic approaches is we are teaching these girls how to wrap their hand around the rubber mallet and drive down one whack-a-mole that they present with, which is wonderful. But it seems to be oftentimes a temporary intervention because it's just a matter of months or maybe a couple of years before the next whack-a-mole pops up. So a lot of times I'll see girls come in and they're like, well, I drink too much and I'm kind of blacking out. Sometimes I'm doing stupid stuff when I drink. I just need some help with that. Okay, so if I help them with that, that's a symptom of an underlying issue, right? So we can drive down that one whack-a-mole, but say 6 months goes by and they're abusing their roommate's Adderall. or they have become very restrictive with their eating, or they've started to purge after they eat. So if we don't address the underlying issues, a lot of times we call them kind of frequent flyers. If we don't address these underlying issues, they'll come back with different stuff. So signs to look for, and again, I apologize. This is kind of 101 stuff for depression and anxiety, but it's important maybe just to review signs. These girls are going to feel very full of stress, a lot of apprehension. They're going to be very easily irritable, have trouble concentrating. They will have sort of irrational fear, sometimes paranoia, be super, super preoccupied with what everybody thinks about them. They're going to almost mind read, like, I know everybody thinks that I'm fat. I know everybody thinks I'm stupid. I know it. There'll physical symptoms like sweating, dizziness, sometimes they'll be short of breath, irregular heartbeat. Right? They're going to talk about how sometimes I'll get dizzy, but I think it's just caffeine. Like I drink way too much coffee. That I only had 4 hours of sleep last night. That's probably what it is. Or I ran so much this morning. I'm sure I'm just dehydrated. They're going to blame it on other things, but watch for trends, watch for patterns, muscle pain, tension, headaches, upset stomach, things like that. Definitely have them rule out any medical issues, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to send these kids to cardiologists or GI doctors, and the doctors aren't going to find anything medically wrong, which tells us that this is going to be more psychosomatic, more depression, anxiety, more emotional things that are surfacing in the body. Another thing is social avoidance. So they're going to isolate in their dorm room sometimes, or they're just going to hole up and watch Netflix on their laptops. They're going to start bowing out of social parties or social interactions because they're going to be too overwhelmed or too afraid of what everybody's going to think about them. Constant fear of failure, either academically or socially. And I don't want us to rule out the social because this is a huge, huge part of life for these college women. A lot of them are absolutely plagued with guilt or stress. They're going to have a lot of panic attacks, anxiety attacks. These are all symptoms. I don't want these women to feel like, oh, I've got a million things wrong with me. Chances are there's one, maybe 2 things going on underneath that Whacka Mole board that are driving all those moles up in the first place. And it's up to us to be able to identify and treat the underlying issue. And all of the Whack-A-Moles that pop up, hopefully will calm down on their own. I ran across a case study. And it was about a girl, and her name is Madison Holleran. And this case study really jumped out at me. I wanted to talk about her in this presentation because she's the epitome of our girl. This is our girl. And if it's okay, I just want to kind of quickly read her story. It begins with a girl named Catherine DeWitt. Catherine DeWitt conquered high school like a gold medal decathlete. She ran track. She represented her school at a statewide girls leadership program and took 8 advanced placement tests, including one for which she independently prepared for going to class. Expectations were high. Every day at 5 o'clock, test scores and updated grades were posted online. Her mother would be the first to comment should her grade go down. In her first 2 weeks on the University of Pennsylvania campus, she hustled. She joined a sorority, signed up to tutor elementary school students, and joined the same Christian group her parents had joined at their alma mater, Stanford. But having gained admittance off the wait list and surrounded by people with seemingly greater drive and ability, she had her first taste of self-doubt. One friend was a world-class figure skater. Another was a winner of the Intel Science competition. Everyone around her was so spectacular and so amazing, and she just wanted to be as amazing as they were. Classmates seemed to have it all together. Every morning, the administration sent out an email blast highlighting faculty and student accomplishments. Some women attended class at 7 a.m. wearing full makeup. Miss DeWitt had acne. They talked about their fantastic internships. She was still focused on the week's homework. Friends' lives, as told through selfies, showed them having more fun, making more friends, and going to better parties. Even the meals they posted to Instagram looked more delicious. Her confidence took another hit when she glanced at the cell phone screen of a guy sitting next to her in class who was texting that he would rather jump out of a plane than have to talk to her. Across the campus on the morning of January 17th, 2014, Madison Holleran, a fellow Penn student, awoke in her dorm room. Madison was a track all-star for Penn, an honor roll student, and an officer in her sorority. She was extremely popular and well-liked and had an incredibly bright future. She was perfect. That morning, Madison went to class. She took a test. She told a few friends she would meet them later that night at the dining hall. She went to the Penn bookstore and bought gifts for her family. While she was there, her dad called. "Maddie, have you found a therapist down there yet?" he asked. "No, but don't worry, Daddy, I'll find one," she told him. But she had no intention of finding one. In fact, she was, at that exact moment, buying the items she would leave for her family at the top of a parking garage. Godiva chocolates for her dad, 2 necklaces for her mom, ginger snaps for her grandparents, who always had those cookies in their home, outfits for her nephew Hayes, who had been born 2 weeks earlier, the Happiness Project for her best friend Ingrid, with a note scribbled inside, and a picture of herself as a young kid holding a tennis racket. Over winter break, she had told her dad that she was borrowing that picture, that she needed it for something. She didn't say what. Then, on the evening of January 17th, just after dusk settled on the city, Madison took a running leap off the 9th level of a parking garage in downtown Philadelphia. She was 19 years old. When Marie DeWitt heard about Madison, she was stunned. She had never met her, but she knew Madison was popular, attractive, and talented. And in a blog post soon afterward, Marie DeWitt would write, "What the hell, girl? I was supposed to be the one who went first. You had so much to live for." Despite her cheery countenance and assiduous completion of assignments, Marie DeWitt had already bought razor blades and written a stack of goodbye letters to loved ones. Sadly, Madison's story is not that uncommon. She was the third of 6 Penn students to commit suicide in a 13-month stretch, and the school is far from the only one to experience a so-called suicide cluster. This past year, Tulane lost 4 students, and App State, at least 3. The disappearance in September of a freshman, Anna Smith, led to an 11-day search before she was found in the North Carolina woods, hanging from a tree. Cornell faced 6 suicides in the 2009 academic year, and in 2003, 5 NYU students leapt to their deaths. Here in Nashville, Vanderbilt has also faced its fair share of suicide clusters. In 2015, the Princeton Review named Vandy the happiest campus in America, and this accolade was promptly followed by 9 student suicides over the following year. See the signs. A lot of times these signs and symptoms of mental illness can go unnoticed, even in a clinical setting, and they remain untreated. Pay attention to possible Whacka Moles. Listen to what they're not saying. Look for coping skills. These girls are going to want to know coping skills. Give me tools for my toolbox, that kind of thing. And that's great. Coping skills are wonderful, but they can only be addressed as short-term interventions. They cannot be relied on as long-term solutions. Watch for the art of avoidance. Burying shame and self-hatred doesn't diffuse it, but it tunnels it underground and will manifest in such intense self-destructive behavior due to hopelessness, due to a feeling of powerlessness, due to these women feeling like this is it. It's never going to get any better. I have failed, and not being able to handle that. When that anger and that self-hatred gets big enough, we start to self-destruct. Watch for these women to smile when they are hurting. I can't tell you how many Vanderbilt women I work with who will tell me with a huge, beautiful, pure white smile on their face how miserable, how upset, how stressed they are, how much they hate their lives, how much they hate themselves. Eating disorders are rampant, you guys. Eating disorders are grossly underdiagnosed, yet epidemic on these campuses. Women find a lot of times that their body is the one thing that they're able to control when all of these other things feel completely out of control. I know what I can do. I can completely lock down on my body. I can completely control what goes in and out of my mouth. I'm going to make this perfect. I'm going to do really, really well at this. And I know the formula for success with this. Millions and millions of college students, men and women, develop eating disorders during their college years. These are very transformative, very malleable years. The vast majority of these kids are not getting help. They don't even realize the extent of their problem. They just think they're quote unquote healthy. They're very common. Eating disorders are very common among all ages and genders. At least 30,000 people in the U.S. suffer from some type of eating disorder. Of all mental illnesses, of every single mental illness, folks suffering from eating disorders have the highest mortality rate. Everybody thinks it's depression. They say, well, if there's one mental illness that has the highest mortality rate, it's depression, because suicide is so closely linked with depression. Yes, but eating disorders has the highest mortality rate due to cardiac events, due to these people's hearts are giving out, internal issues, GI issues. People will begin to bleed internally. They're having heart attacks. Tissue is eroding in their esophagus. It has the highest mortality rate, and we are praising everybody. Oh my gosh, you look so good, girl. You look great. What have you've lost weight. You look so good. Oh my gosh, you're so disciplined. I can't believe you run as much as you do. So these girls are also getting this kind of praise and positive feedback, which is only forcing and driving that eating disorder home even more. One person dies as a direct result of an eating disorder every 62 minutes. Vulnerability factors for our girls. A lot of them don't feel like they have a voice. They're not heard. A lot of these girls feel like they're a victim of circumstance, especially if it's related to maybe an abusive upbringing or a pressure cooker family or a sexual assault. They don't feel like they have a sense of control. They don't feel like anybody's going to listen to them. And even if they did listen to them, they're not going to care anyway. They typically maintain a desperate fear of judgment and a desperate fear of other people not liking them. I call a lot of my girls Little Miss Perfect. You hear things like, I don't want to be a burden. I'll say, honey, who do you talk to about this in your life? Well, you. And I'll say, well, sure, but who else? I mean, do you talk to your mom? Do you talk to your boyfriend? Do you talk to your support system? Well, no, I don't want to be a burden. I mean, they've got other stuff going on in there. I don't want to weigh them down. You'll hear that a lot. Or you'll start talking about, are you angry? Do you ever feel angry? Do you ever feel pissed off about any of this stuff? Well, I don't get angry. I never really fear anger. That statement always scares me a lot. That tells me that, of course, they have felt anger. They felt anger their whole life. Anger is primal. You can't get away from anger. But it's all been tunneled inward. It's all been driven down underneath the surface. That's really scary for me as a clinician. You'll hear them say, I could have always done something different, or, I could have been better, or, yes, so-and-so got mad at me, or I got in a fight with my roommate, but it was probably my fault anyway. They absolutely can't stand it. They can't stand it. They would rather be set on fire than someone be mad at them. Absolutely the end of the world if someone's upset with them, which you'll notice again with your relationship with them as a clinician. They're gonna maybe edit what they say because they don't want you to think poorly of them or get mad at them or think that they're like a bad person. They have a desperate sense of fear of failure. I'm a total failure. I can't believe I got a B on that biology test. I can't believe I've never had a B in my whole life. how am I going to get into med school? How is this, on and on and on and on and on. Nobody would listen or care or do anything anyway. I don't want to disappoint anybody. You'll hear a lot of these kinds of statements. These are all big red flag statements that there's something going on underneath that whack-a-mole board. Education, education, education. Education regarding ways to handle hopelessness as well as other intense emotion is a very effective antidote to destructive and maladaptive behaviors. So please encourage these guys. This is where DBT can come in. Distress tolerance techniques can come in. Learn to use emotion as a signal to examine yourself and your feelings and an opportunity to grow. So a lot of times with my girls, I teach them all emotion is the same. All emotion is equal. They all just feel differently. There's no such thing as negative emotions and positive emotions. There's just different feelings, but lean into them, use them. Every emotion you have is a tap on your shoulder to alert you to something that you're thinking about. So start to tolerate these feelings. Start to learn what they're called. Start to put a word on them. Make them a little more tangible. It's going to make them manageable. Never, ever be scared of what you feel. It's only a feeling. It can't hurt you. Use it. Learn from it. What should we do about this stuff? Well, I think we need to learn to differentiate taken substance issues too far versus clients who are acting out. So again, sometimes with these girls who present with alcohol abuse, or I'm blacking out on Thursdays when we go out, things like that. Is it really all, is that really it, or is there something else bigger that might be going on? Is this just a diet that's gone a little too far, or are you using food to manipulate emotion, to manipulate other people and yourself? Try to observe with all these women, no matter what they tell you. Observe, don't react, and obviously create a very safe environment to process without any judgment or fear. They already have so much judgment and fear and self-doubt in their own hearts and their own minds. They can't ever experience that from us. Monitor initial reactions, such as affect versus emotional discord. Watch for their pleasing tendencies, avoidance behaviors, procrastination, things like that. Teach them how to label feeling states. It requires them to be very mindful. Very, very mindful. So again, mindfulness techniques can be very helpful. Teach them how to observe their emotion without judging it or thinking they're a bad person for feeling it. And encourage them to, of course, stay present with the hopelessness. It's okay to feel shame. It's okay to feel fear. But why? What are you afraid of? How is your emotion ruling you instead of the other way around? And most importantly, always offer empathy and some space for them to feel the anger, feel the shame, feel the hopelessness in a safe place without judgment and without any external pressure. And lastly, of course, intervention and treatment. I love to combine what I call kind of the trifecta, the CBT, DBT, ACT trifecta. With a lot of this population, I'll find myself mix and matching maybe these treatment modalities. So first and foremost, you're going to need to bring in a lot of mindfulness. Pay attention. Learn how to observe, almost like a science experiment, almost like you're just kind of you've crawled into this body. Oh my gosh, this is what it's like to be a human. This is what it's like to feel fear. This is what anger is like. Okay, all right, it's okay. And create some space to just feel these things and pay attention to what they're called. Learn about distress tolerance. Learn about how to tolerate things that have historically been almost intolerable to feel. And then use these feelings to alert you to thought processes. If you feel a lot of shame, if you feel a lot of fear, if you feel a lot of hopelessness, why? Where is that coming from? How do you see the world? How do you see yourself? What types of thought processes are promoting these types of feelings? And how can we kind of tweak that? How can we reconfigure and maybe reframe how you think to produce different emotional outcomes? And be careful with acceptance and commitment therapy with a lot of these girls, because that's sort of with ACT, which I love ACT, But I love to sort of use that in the last maybe third of their treatment. If you try to start out with ACT, a lot of times, especially in an outpatient setting, you're going to find that their value system is going to center around perfectionism. It's going to, you'll say, what's important. You'll do some values work, and they're going to say, well, it's important to be the best. It's important to win. It's important to be the skinniest. It's important to, right? These kind of things. So give them a chance to reframe sort of how they see the world and really sort of connect head and heart, really sort of connect cognition and emotion, and use sort of wise mind to be able to come up with a really authentic value system, and then learn how to act in accordance with a really authentic value system. So again, after some CBT, DBT intervention, I really love to use kind of some ACT there at the end. Again, coping skills, deep breathing, grounding exercises, all of these are wonderful in the beginning, wonderful to calm and sort of get them out of having panic attacks or being completely preoccupied with perfectionism or winning, things like that. But at coping skills, we cannot stop with coping skills. We can't. These are short-term interventions that will allow symptoms to calm down long enough to where we can actually start to address some real issues, what's happening underneath that Whacka Mole board. And again, once the symptoms have improved, please don't stop. Please don't dismiss them and discharge them from therapy. Once a lot of these Whacka Mole symptoms have subsided, the drinking has stopped, the Adderall abuse, or they don't smoke pot anymore, or they're not restricting their food, or they're not acting out with shopping or with sex, or their depression is sort of calmed down. Please don't stop. Please don't stop there. Please make sure that we lift up that Whacka Mole board and we put out that fire that's creating the smoke and the steam that drove all these symptoms up in the first place. And above all, you guys, we're in the business of selling hope. That's what we do. Without hope, we have nothing. And so when these girls show up and they feel so hopeless and meaningless and worthless, at the end of the day, we have to get them to buy back into hope. Without hope, there's not a future. Without hope, there's not a point. Without hope, why get out of bed in the morning? So once we can help heal some of those wounds that are underneath that Whack-A-Mole board, it's important to instill a sense of hope. And I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to let you guys know that the reason why this presentation is so important to me is I was one of these girls. I came from a very abusive household growing up, a father who is a lieutenant colonel in the Army, an emotionally unavailable mother, learned perfectionism as a survival technique when I was very young. So by the time I got to college, I was this girl. I was thrown into a 40,000 student campus, and everyone was just as smart, just as bright, had just as much potential as I did, and I completely self-destructed. So I think it's very important to go back into that hole to pull other women out of it, and to talk to as many people in this field who treat these women, and kind of speak to what's true, speak to what I remember, and speak to what I see with the women that I treat. I treat a lot of Vanderbilt girls, a lot of college women, and I see this all the time. My story is not unique. My story is not special. So I want to make sure that we have as many tools as we can, and we know what to look for, and we know the right questions to ask to make sure that we're reaching, truly reaching as many women in this population as we possibly can. So I know there's a lot of information kind of crammed into a short amount of time, but I do appreciate everyone's attention and you guys listening, and I know that we have a few minutes for Q&A here at the end. If anybody, I'll turn this back over to Tom.
All right, thanks a lot, Courtney. That was a lot of great stuff. Before we get into the Q&A, though, I would like to hand things over to Sarah Tortorella from Foundations for a few words from our sponsors.
Thanks, Tom. So here is a recovery movement, mental health and addiction, powered by Foundation's Recovery Network. Our Heroes in Recovery 6K virtual race series encourages participants to celebrate their own recovery, walk to remember a loved one they lost to addiction, or be part of the movement. Races aren't just about crossing the finish line. They're about bringing together communities to support local charities and break the stigma surrounding addiction and mental health issues. And we want you to know that no matter where your finish line is, your virtual participation at home makes a tangible difference all over the country. So learn more and register today at hero6k.com. And
all right. Thanks, Sarah. We have had some questions coming in from our audience. However, we would like to remind you that you can use the Q&A area below the slides to submit a question at any time. And also, we've had a few people asking to download a copy of the slides. Please click the Resources tab to the right of the presentation window. All right, let's get into some questions today. Okay, first question. What do you think are some good strategies to determine if actual progress is being made, or if the client is simply telling you what they want you to hear? You had mentioned that this is a population that tends to be driven to please.
That is an excellent question. I would watch for stages. For instance, we know we're making progress in the beginning if they report that they are eating more regularly and sleeping more regularly, if they talk about having less panic attacks, if they talk about being able to focus more. You can also kind of see progress just visually with these girls. A lot of them will initially show up, and I'm sure that you've seen some of this too if you do work with this population. They vibrate. They'll sit there with their legs crossed, and one or both legs is just will literally I can't even do it. I can't even shake my leg as fast as these girls will shake their legs. So I'll watch for visual cues sometimes. Like maybe after a couple of months they're not shaking so much, or they're not as tangential in their conversations. They're able to kind of focus and go where I'm guiding them. They will be able to stay on a thought and articulate it to completion. A lot of the times, you can see affect starting to match stated emotion. Things start to kind of line up a little bit. That's a wonderful, wonderful sign of progress. When they start to be able to talk about various emotional states without disintegrating. When they can sit there and talk about, okay, I got really angry when, and I felt very disappointed when, and I feel very scared because. This is wonderful progress because it shows that they can not only articulate an emotional state, but they can sit there and tolerate feeling it even as they are remembering that to describe it to you. So in the beginning, a lot of times they'll skip over stuff, and you'll hear a lot of I don't knows as answers to questions. So that will subside a little bit, and you'll get into more specific answers. When you start to help them see patterns in their lives, when you start to help them see that things aren't their fault, and you can alleviate some of the guilt, you'll start to hear how they start to see things a little bit differently. They'll start to describe conflicts with professors or boyfriends or roommates more objectively, instead of taking it all on as this is my fault, I shouldn't have done this, things like that. So you'll start to hear it in the way that they describe situations, and in the way they describe relationships changing, and the way that they can tolerate different emotional states. Those are all excellent signs of progress.
All right. Here's a question about working with parents. How do you show support as a parent where you encourage your child to do her best and to push herself, while at the same time making sure that they do not feel that they are under unrealistic expectations?
That's also an excellent question. A lot of this work, when possible, should involve family work. Sadly, a lot of the college kids that we're going to work with, their families live in other cities. But for parents, I always advise with your college women, check in to see what their expectations are. So many of these girls go under the radar because they're the ones nobody has to worry about. They're the ones who have it all together. They're the ones who are making great grades, and they seem very happy and put together on the outside, but nobody's really checking in to see what's going on the inside. So as a parent, I desperately employ inquisition. Poke around. How you doing? How you really doing? What your grades are great. Everything on paper looks wonderful. How do you feel? You can always talk to me. Things like that. That whatever you do, your best is your best. That's different from the best. Try to stay focused on your path because your path is unique. Try not to compare yourself, honey, to everybody else. You are doing beautifully. All kinds of encouragement and support, obviously, but I think where a lot of our parents are missing the mark is assumption. Honestly, we're assuming that these girls are everything's okay, everything's fine, because everything's so put together on the outside. So even if, as a parent, you're noticing your daughter is beautiful and thin and smart and academically successful, maybe pay attention. Maybe pay attention and kind of check in with her, see how she's doing it, and create very safe places for her to be able to process various emotions with you as a parent. I think that's very important, especially because, we as clinicians, I get these girls 1, maybe 2 hours a week. So I know that communication is much higher between these women and their parents, and a lot of times it is with their mothers. So for mom to be able to create a space for being human, it's okay that you got to be. It's okay that this has happened. It's okay that that's happened. And try to see where she's coming from in terms of where her expectations are.
All right. Do you have any tips on how to overcome stigma of going for counseling and the idea for these patients that it means there's something wrong with them? This audience member says, this is an age group that so badly wants to fit in and achieve. They want to make their family proud. And this person says that they have a hard time getting clients to remain in treatment because of the negative stigma.
Which is heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking. I think we all are under the firm belief that everyone on the planet should have a counselor or a therapist. Okay, so something that I work with my girls. Rule number 1, always meet them where they are. Always meet them where they are. So if they show up and they've got shame around being in therapy, being in counseling, coming to see you in the first place, I always make it very clear to these girls that this is something that does not have to be broadcasted. We don't have to talk about this. There is something called confidentiality, and our relationship is completely confidential. We do not have to process anything at all outside of this room. If I pass you on the street, I won't even say hi to you if you don't want. It is totally okay. If that's where she is, I will meet her there. As far as general stigma on counseling, general stigma with even mental illness, sometimes I'll say, okay, you'll hear, I disappear 8 a.m. every morning and I don't have a class in my room, or, every Wednesday rather, and my roommate knows I don't have a class, so where do I tell her I'm going? I'll say, would you like to tell her that you come see a counselor? I would, because I'd like to talk to her about it, but she's going to think I'm crazy. And I'm not crazy. I'll say, okay, well, tell her that we are working out next steps. Tell her we're here to work through, what's next for you after college, which essentially is true. Some of these girls will get to a point where they even become advocates for mental health. They become advocates for counseling, just as I did. On the flip side, after you go through kind of a recovery process with some of this stuff, you realize how amazing the world is after you go through a therapeutic process. You want to tell your friends. You want to scream it from a rooftop because you see how much it helps you. But as far as stigma on the front end, honestly, I think that's a a global issue, but with these girls, I try to meet them where they are and come up with vague kind of scenarios to protect them and make them feel safe, because no matter what, I need to get them back in my office the next week. I need to get, so if I'm a career coach, if I'm a life coach, if I'm whatever it is, let's come up with something that keeps you in session. Let's come up with something that you feel comfortable with that can protect this process.
All right, and what do you know? It is the top of the hour. I think that's going to be just about all the time that we have for questions today. We do have some final instructions regarding CE credit. Do not leave this page. Please continue to stay on the platform, and the site will automatically redirect you to a survey. This must be completed in order to generate your CE certificate. For those watching in a group, as a reminder, please download the group submission guide in the resources tab to the right of your slides and follow the instructions provided. Please note, CE credit is not available for the archived webinar. CE credit is only available for the live event on August 28th. If you enjoyed today's program, please join us at 1 p.m. on September 25th for a presentation with Lisa Henderson on the behavioral health in the digital age. A link to register can be found in the resources tab to the right of the video window. I want to thank Courtney Grimes once again for an excellent presentation. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Foundations Recovery Network, for making today's program possible. Finally, a thank you to you and our audience for participating today. We hope you'll join us in the future for another IABHC webinar. This concludes today's presentation. Have a great day.